Politics 17, Season 3, Episode 6. We've got a good show for you. Well, I say we've got a good show for you. I don't know if it's in the future.
I think we have a show for you.
Yeah, even if you watch this on YouTube, obviously it's actually in the past. But right now it's in my future, and it could be terrible. I mean, based on previous episodes, the statistical likelihood is that it will be terrible. But let's crack on with some politics straight away. Now, unfortunately, we forgot to do Corbyn Watch last week.
We did. We did Corbyn Watch. You held up the sign and all.
No, but I thought I held it up. I haven't watched it back. I thought we held it up before we went on broadcast. Anyway, this was last week's sign to prove that we prepared it, but now I need to amend it. So,
I love the production values that go into this, that you're amending stuff online. What's the point? You're scribbling out...
It looks like 407, but it's actually 47.
Day 47. That means that
47 in the Corbyn Watch house.
He's been in charge for a month and a half now, and do you know what? I think that deserves a round of applause. You know, I think that deserves a good, strong round of applause because, let's be honest, not many people in the Labour Party thought he'd last this long. So
no.
I think we should be impressed, suitably impressed.
No, we should say not many Labour Party MPs thought he would last this long. Many members of the Labour Party thought he would, just not the people they've elected.
Yeah. I hoped he would last this long. So that's good. That's good. Do you know what? That shows democracy works. The power of the people, not the power of the top echelon people.
I thought you were going to say robots there. I was like, nah, not people, robots. The power of the reptile Illuminati that run the world.
Well, we discussed the Illuminati last week, didn't we? About
the Lambos reptiles.
Living in those volcanoes.
Oh, terrible.
Yes. No, really
That's why gas prices are so expensive, because they just turn the heating up loads. They've got to live in a terrarium. That might be the longest word we've used. Anyway, Jeremy Corbyn has just been slagged off by a whole country.
Yes, indeed. In fact, the entire country of Saudi Arabia turns out doesn't like our leader of the opposition very much, purely because he said something that I think most people in the world agree with.
Well, we should give you the whole story first. This was foreign minister. I believe he's a foreign minister. He's an ambassador. Sorry, Saudi ambassador.
Ambassador to the United Kingdom.
Prince Mohammed bin Nawaf bin Abdulaziz Al Saud. So he's a prince. He's obviously a member of a royal family. Now he is accused Jeremy Corbyn of breaching respect by scuppering a trade deal with Riyadh being the capital of Saudi Arabia, for anyone who didn't know that. A little bit of education on the internet. It's quite hard to find, but we dole it out. Basically, the criticism has come from Prince Mohammed bin Nawaf for the decision by the British government to cancel a contract where the British government were going to advise the authorities in Saudi Arabia on prison reform. Now, Michael Gove is in public, like the allegation is that no reason was given. It was just sort of binned off. So the argument there would be laziness, which seems quite appropriate. But the Saudi ambassador is accused, basically said that because Corbyn was involved in the campaign to not have that 17-year-old guy, I forget the exact punishment. He was definitely going to be crucified. There may have been something else to it. I don't know if they go straight into the crucifixion or if there's a bit of flogging first. I'll put my hands up. I'm not familiar with the inner workings of Saudi Arabian justice.
There were lashings involved in a grandfather's case recently. He's just been released, actually.
That's probably why I got confused. But there's definitely going to be a crucifixion going on. But whether that's been cancelled, I'm not actually sure. But because of the campaign against that, Jeremy Corbyn has been accused of lacking respect for Saudi Arabia. And I really don't know what to make of this because, this might be the first thing that Corbyn's actually been accused of doing. Which is quite impressive. Most of the criticism at Corbyn has been him accusing him of actually doing nothing, such as forming a coherent Labour Party policy. No. getting control of his shadow cabinet. He hasn't been accused of doing that, but he has been accused by a Saudi Arabian ambassador of scuppering this. So actually, this might be Corbyn's first victory. So,
what I think is great is the fact that it's come, a month and a half into his term as leader of the opposition. Now, let's be blunt here, okay? It was the Conservative Party, the current government's choice to scrap this deal with Saudi Arabia, which, by the way, I fully support because I thoroughly disagree that we should be helping penal systems which incur the death penalty or anything described as lashings. Now,
yeah, unless it's by posh people, in which case it's probably okay.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But so I fully support the decision, and it's the Conservative Party who decided to say, well, it's wrong. But you got to remember, it was the Conservative Party who 12 months ago decided it would be a good idea to have Saudi Arabia on the United Nations Human Rights Council, which, to all intents and purposes, is not a good idea. Their human rights history being, well, sketchy at best, downright abysmal at worst.
Well, also, the worst thing about that was it came out on WikiLeaks that was some backdoor dealing, which you're not even meant to do. I forget what the exact cable was, but I don't want to be like that teacher who says, "Oh, you can do some research yourself for extra homework." But I genuinely can't remember the full story. But you can Google it if you want. So I'm now a hypocrite. But generally, there were the WikiLeaks proved that was some backdoor dealings. So.
Basically, they said if you can get the Arab countries to support us in coming onto the United Nations Human Rights Council, we'll get our European countries and our busy mates to support you, and that happened. So, although on one hand the Conservative government's done really badly and horribly wrong, or at least the coalition government did, in allowing them to be part of the Human Rights Council, they have made a good decision in basically stopping us from being complicit in human rights abuses. That having been said, the greatest thing about this is that because of going back 12 months ago, the fact that they said that all these backdoor dealings were done through David Cameron, through his back channels and all these kind of things, and these agreements were made to appoint Saudi Arabia to the United Nations Human Rights Council. It cannot be seen for the the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to be criticising the UK government, because in a way that would be going back on what they agreed this time last year. So what they have to do is find another angle, and because Jeremy Corbyn has at some point in the past supported the action against the human rights abuses by Saudi Arabia, what they've done is said, oh well, he's an easy scapegoat. Let's go for him. And they've really actually gone for the jugular when it comes to Jeremy Corbyn. Lacking mutual respect. My response, by the way, is up on our politics blog, politics.blogspot.com, where I mentioned
excellent plug, sir.
Indeed, where I mentioned that the moment that they have mutual respect for the women folk of their country and allow them to drive, to vote, and to generally be not classed as second-class citizens, I will suddenly start having a little bit more respect for the Saudi Arabians. So, quite frankly, they can get stuffed.
Do you reckon, though, because they're not allowed to criticise the UK government in public because of the dealings you outlined, but next time something goes wrong, Tim Farron is going to get an absolute earful? It basically be like Dick Dastardly in Dick Dastardly's Men of Those Magnificent Flying Machines, which is not called Catch the Pigeon. It's be like, Tim Farron, you fiend! You've undermined our trade deal for the last time. I made it sound like Skeletor there, but and then after that.
Did you see Cameron's put down of Tim Farron in the House of Commons? He stood up to ask a question at PMQs, and and he said, and Cameron said, first of all, I'd like to thank you for most of your MPs for turning up, because 7 out of his 8 MPs turned up.
That is impressive.
Which I think, considering they're former coalition partners, I think that's a pretty harsh put down.
I mean, fair play. When someone pulls out a verbal leg like that, yeah, nice. That is impressive. Talking of turning up, I feel we've done Corbyn Watch.
Yeah.
So basically, there's 2 more issues we need to talk about. The first one, as of today, although because of a time difference, it might now be yesterday for China. China has cancelled its one-child policy. It's not an all-you-can-child policy, but it's now a two-child policy. And,
all-you-can-child.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say like an all-you-can-eat buffet, but it's not really the eat. Anyway,
I think you got yourself into a bit of a tizzy there, mate.
I did. I'm absolutely tizzed. But the thing is, I don't really know what to say about this because this is good news, and it must be like on a global scale. This will be a key point. Like the Chinese one-child policy has been a big issue / background issue because obviously it's not the most important thing, but it has had a significant impact on the world globally. And China, country with the biggest population, scrapping the one-child policy, moving to a two-child policy, which is because in theory to maintain stable population, it's something like 2.1. It's just over 2.1. Something like 2.12, 2.14. GCSE geography is letting me down here, but it's just over two children to maintain population because of disease and people who die early and people who don't get married, blah blah blah. Blah. But this is significant. But apart from that, I don't really know what to say. All I can say is, yeah, this is really big news, which makes me sound like an absolute cretin because I can't say anything else on it. Anything wise to say other than this is really big news?
Well, actually, I not particularly wise, more factual. The reason they're scrapping the one-child policy is because they have there's been a preference for having male, having male children. So the idea that you would have a male heir is really quite prevalent in China because it means that there's not quite as dreadful as Saudi Arabia, but there really is a serious issue with sexism within China. So the preference for having a male child means that there is a real skew in favor of male population, which makes China a 1.3 billion human sausage fest. So it probably makes it the worst country to visit if you wanted to pull a bird, because I think there are something like 3 blokes for every woman there, which is pretty horrific statistics, especially when you live in this country where it's a little bit more than 1 woman per man, which is quite nice, really.
Yeah, well, thanks for rubbing it in. I was going to go to visit the wall, but yeah, obviously, good night out. Clearly not available.
You're not going to find it in Beijing, mate. That's for sure.
No, probably not. Actually, that's really depressing.
But they've also got an aging population because a lot of people in China live for a long time. I think the oldest person in the world is Chinese, or at least a significant proportion of the Chinese population live for over 100. Obviously, there being more people, there's likelihood for more of the population.
You'd expect about 1 in 6 of the oldest people in the world to be Chinese.
Exactly. Yeah, with 1 in 6. Yeah, absolutely. But the fact is that there are a lot of old people in China, and they're not killing them off at the same rate they used to because of international sanctions against that kind of thing. So they've got to.
What are you on about? Yes. If we're talking about like the rise of communism in China, civil war, estimated deaths something like 27 million, or Chinese Jesus, estimated deaths 10 million. I mean, that's part of the reason China's such an authoritarian government is because the majority of mass deaths in the world have occurred in what is modern day China because it's so big. You just had warring kingdoms because it was so big. Anytime something happened, was it about estimated 50 million deaths under Chairman Mao because of the Great Leaps Forward and rice hoarding, things like that. Something like that. But anyway, yeah. So China's ended its policy, and yeah, the argument is the aging population is going to slow down economic growth. Why don't we just put the retirement age up to 100?
Well, I mean, my logic behind this is that I don't think it will do, because you know how many jobs these days require like a year to 2 years experience? Well, by the time you're sort of 50 odd, the likelihood of you having that required experience is quite high. So, I mean, why is it going to slow down economic growth? Because by the time everyone's 50, they'll have the required experience to go to the job they want to do. So the last sort of 20, 30 years of their life can be spent doing the job they want to do. So there's no, I don't think there's a problem in an aging population, because they'll have had the required experience that employers would like to see on a resume.
This does sound like bitterness from you, from like applying for various jobs, like as a young individual, like must be under 25, must have 18 years work experience in
Yeah.
more advanced field than going for. Oh, thanks. Yeah, that's actually going to be quite difficult. Fortunately, I've been lying on my CV, so actually I've got all the experience you need.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. You and I both know that at our age, getting a job can be quite difficult. Luckily, we're both employed. One of us in a full-time contract, one of us on 0 hours. So well done for
and
that.
minimum wage, of course.
Oh yeah. You're not even getting the living wage.
No. Minimum. This is all part of my master plan to become some sort of man of the people MP in my later years.
Yeah, fair enough.
I need to sign on for 1 week as well, but I need to do it at a really like mismanaged like benefit office, so that I can both claim I was and wasn't on the dole in the correct interviews, and put out different bits of proof that I both was and wasn't. Be like, oh, young people should never be on the dole. I never was. Didn't you say you were? Well, I know the hardships that it's like to live on.
And then, of course, this is the interview you have after you become a multimillionaire.
Yeah, sort of like how Donald Trump said in an interview in like the late 90s, if I ever ran for president, I'd run for the Republican Party, because I forget the exact wording, but basically he said some mean things about Republican voters, and now he's actually doing it. He's a genius. You've got to plan these things ahead. Anyway, the final politics thing we need to talk about, we've talked about China in the most moronic way possible, so we'll just edit that out. The tax credit vote. Another example of how, another clear-cut example of how the House of Lords, which should be the most redundant and pointless thing on earth, actually does quite a good job.
Yeah.
Amazingly, it's government. If anyone wasn't paying attention and gets their news from here, which seems fantastically unlikely, but is possible.
I like the idea that people get their current affairs news from a weekly podcast made by two idiots in effectively one's bedroom and one's study.
Well, this is going online, so I like the idea that in 50, 60 years' time, there'll be someone at uni, which, basically they'll put uni mode on their glasses for like 3D world. They'll be referencing us. They'll be like some idiots, but it's like this is like when you can reference a newspaper from the time it happened, and it's got, even though the person writing it might be utterly ill-informed, because it's literally from the time, it's a credible source of how people, I'm not saying we're the representative man, but how people at the time perceived it. People can reference this in the future. So when we're just a brain in a jar,
well, mine will be pickled by that point.
Yeah, exactly. Just
tastes better that way.
But yeah, basically, the government was quite keen on basically reducing the amount of tax credits people were eligible to vote for, even though they said before the election they weren't going to reduce the amount of tax credits people could get.
They said it so many times. They said it so many times before the election that it became almost party line that they were not going to reduce tax credits, because there were so many rumours going around. And in fact, in one of the debates, or one of the questions that was asked, David Cameron was asked, was, can you say now that you are not going to cut tax credit? And he said, I want to dispel this myth that we are going to cut tax credits. And lo and behold, within the first year of him being in Parliament with a full Conservative background, he now has the mandate to cut tax credits. And the House of Lords, which is, by the way, I find this hilarious, it's the largest legislative body in the world. 827, I think it is, officials in the House of Lords. Single largest legislative body in the world. And they, I can't believe, basically what they've done is they turned around to the government and said, you don't have a majority here, we're really rich, but even we can see you're screwing the poor, which I think is pretty darn impressive.
It is impressive, actually. What I like about it as well is there's been calls because of this. I know it's on question time, probably right now. Actually, no, in 5 minutes' time, live, because it starts at 11:35. Billy Bragg, the musician chap, is leading a campaign to basically say that if a government ever breaks a manifesto promise, that there can be an instant revote, which I imagine probably won't go anywhere. But it's nice that someone is trying. But if people specifically run on an issue and then go against it straight away, they can't do it. But when you think about it, UK economy is still in quite a fragile position, and if that is the case, then politicians will all become unemployed, and that's going to add at least 600 to the unemployment figures. So it's just not a sensible idea.
Well, I mean, from my perspective, I actually thoroughly agree with the campaign, with that idea. If you run on a specific issue, for example, back in 2010, which is the first time I voted in a general election, I think the first time you voted in a general election as well, the Lib Dems ran on the promise of not raising tuition fees. And the moment they got into power, they sold that soul down the river.
But that was a coalition, so they can say, "Oh, it wasn't actually us; it was the Tories."
Oh, yeah.
Don't forget, all of last Parliament, anytime the Tories said, "Oh, it was the Lib Dems," like it was literally like being at school when you're 6 years old. Did you do this? No, he did it. Like it was asinine.
Well, it was pathetic, and we all know it was. But the fact is, they did it, and the fact is, they were a party in power at the time. Now, almost every single student in the country voted Lib Dem. I didn't, but I know that pretty much. In fact, I think they got the highest percentage out of the student vote, which was huge at the time. Certainly, Norwich South, which is where I voted, had a Lib Dem MP as a result. Charles Clarke was the previous MP there, and he got ousted and replaced by Simon someone or other, who was Lib Dem MP there for 5 years. But he ran on the promise that he was not going to increase tuition fees and try and cut tuition fees. But the government then at the time for which the Lib Dems was a part increased it. Now, had we gone back and said, actually, do you know what? You've gone back on an election promise that you had made before we stuck our cross in the ballot paper. We did that because we believed that you were going to do this for us, the people who voted you in. So if you're going to go back on it, why can't we re-vote? Why can't we go back and recall the vote and say, well, this isn't fair because we voted for you for a promise that you made and you're going back on it? I actually fundamentally agree with the idea that that's democracy in its purest form, because if the people aren't getting what they voted for, then they should have the chance to vote for what they want.
It's true, but do you think it is a realistic possibility? And do you even think, if it went into law, do you think the government of the future would just be like, oh, well, we didn't actually say it like that? Because when you think about it from this angle and squint your eyes, what we actually said is what we're doing. Like,
I think that what it should do is that there should be people out there who, by the way, I think shouldn't be elected. But, like, for example, I tell you what, for example, I think it should be in the hands of the law lords to say, you broke an election promise, we will call a referendum on the previous election. If the majority of people want to go back and re-vote, they can. So then, if it's clear cut, they just go, right, okay, sod it, we're going to go for a re-vote because or another election because you guys have clearly broken a promise. If it's a little up in the air, then they'll go to a referendum and say, do you want another election? I mean, that's just democracy working its way down to stripping it bare, really, stripping democracy down to its purest form and allowing the people to have that voice within the elected parliament. Which is why I enjoyed so much the House of Lords, who are completely unelected, telling the government to get stuff, because it was the right thing to do, it was morally correct. I don't think that they were necessarily following party line when they did it, because a lot of the crossbenchers, a lot of the Conservatives didn't necessarily agree with the party line, but still, because they had the votes, they needed the votes from the Lords to pass the bill. they voted for it. But what I find hilarious is that so far this current government has had 17 pieces of legislation gone from the Commons to the Lords and back to the Commons again. But that's not a small amount. Throughout the entire of the last Parliament, they had something like 20 odd or 21 pieces of legislation knocked back by the Lords. Within the first year, they've had 17 so far, which is staggering.
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that. It'd be interesting to see what the fallout from this is. In a way, I'm almost worried that, like, being those, sort of never let a crisis go to waste, opportunitarian kind of people, they're going to use this to force through a load of Lords reforms, which will make the Lords useless, which should be a good thing.
Yeah.
But probably won't be. Which is, that's why the House of Lords is so weird. Like, from an intellectual level, I appreciate that it should be redundant. It just isn't. Like, it's, for years the accusation has been it's been stuffed full of Tory-leaning people, and now they're voting down a Tory government. We should point out as well. I don't know how you feel about this, but I feel it is worth arguing that the argument about things like tax credits being a terrible idea, has some validity. The idea that it's on a sort of black and white kind of scale. If you've got a large company like not one of the major supermarkets, but say one called like Besco or Basda, and then you've got some small, very tiny shop on the corner, or even not on a corner, but like basic capitalism, like if your shop is cleaner and the staff are friendlier, people will shop there, and then you'll earn more money, and then you can raise the wages of your employees so that you encourage the friendliest employees and blah 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 blah. That sort of idea. Yeah. The idea being that, because of the tax credit system, like anti-tax means that if the corner shops, Joe Blogg's corner shop, wants to pay its employees, £9 an hour rather than minimum wage, and the big employers don't actually pay minimum wage, but for this example they do, then not only is he paying his employees more and taking them out of that, making that they need less tax credit, he's from his profit supporting the government and subsidising his competitors, because part of his tax goes towards all of their tax credit payouts for their employees. Like those arguments, like it's one of the few things that I don't really know where I stand on, because it's a system that we've entered a place where actually people genuinely need it, or their lives would be far worse than they are. But like the arguments behind why it is a terrible system make perfect sense. Like, subsidising your competitors is the most anti-capitalist thing in the world. And I don't want to stand here and say capitalism has zero flaws at all, but the idea that you can, by paying your staff, by trying to reward your staff, you're hurting yourself twice.
Yeah,
it is genuinely terrible, and I honestly don't know where. I don't know what, like, if it's a percentage game, up to 5%, up to 10%, it's okay, or if it's just a terrible system and you should just massively increase the minimum wage to £15 or something. Because there are some people who say that if you did that, it just had a blanket massive upswing, then everything else would sort of balance out. Initially, obviously, over the time it slips back, but it's the people who are against tax credits. There's the people who are against tax credits because they just don't like the poor, which, fair enough, have the courage of your convictions. Some people are rich and don't like poor people, but then the people who actually raise the arguments against it, there does appear to be a lot of validity, and it's quite hard to argue against resolute logic.
Well, yeah, absolutely. But the fact of the matter is that tax credits are a part of this system, and people do rely on them. If they'd never been introduced in the first place, then there wouldn't be people who rely on them now. So realistically, the problem all stems from whoever originally introduced tax credits into the system, which was quite possibly a Labour government, if I'm being honest, but I don't know. But we've got to go back to that. The idea that there are people out there that rely on tax credits because they don't make enough money at work in order to survive, then they'll have those cut. I mean, it's not a case of working more hours, because if you're, for example, on a 0 hours contract, it's a case of getting the hours when you can get them, and getting the job, getting the paid the hours that you do. It's not a case of saying, oh, okay, I'm going to need more hours because I'm going to cut down my tax credits being cut, because if they're not there, they're not there to do. So the fact that they're now going back and scaling back tax credits, it can be a good thing from a logical point of view, yes. It's stifling the idea that people are subsidising bigger business because the bigger business pays less. But the fact is that that has to be countered against sort of the possibility of human life loss. Really, that's the main thing, is that there are people out there who are truly struggling.
Yeah,
and
it's an example of it's basically ideological kind of and arguably sensible long-term planning versus actually serious issues that need to be dealt with right now.
And serious social issues as well.
Yeah, from my understanding, two of the biggest tax credit issues, and I don't know if one of these is tax credit, but one is housing benefit, and the second is childcare.
Yeah, child benefit will be the one that gets it.
Oh, is it child benefit? Yeah. So
yeah.
It is a serious issue. But basically, people can stand there all their life and say, yes, well, actually, when you think about it, it's a terrible system. But this impacts people's lives completely. So it's
a reality that we have to deal with. That's the thing. Is these are part of our tax credits are part of our daily life. They're well, not for me, but they're part of people's and families' daily lives, and that's got to be recognised. And the problem is that whilst it's in a perfect system, in a perfect capitalist society, you wouldn't require tax credits at all. Everyone would be being paid a living wage or more. Everyone would be paying taxes into the system, whereby public amenities are able to run without any requirement of borrowing money from nefarious places. But that's just not our reality at the moment. Our reality is that tax credits are required for people in order for them to survive in our society, and it's wrong that they're being cut purely because when they are cut, and they will be cut, they haven't got themselves any reprieve. The Conservative government will force through what they feel is the right thing to do. When they are cut, people will suffer, and that's the problem. Is that whilst in a perfect society we can say yes, tax credits are no longer required. We don't want tax credits because our society, our capitalist society, is built on high wages. High taxes as well. I mean, there's nothing wrong with paying your taxes if you think the people who are spending the money are doing a good job of it. The reality of that is quite far away, and preventing people from being, putting more people below the poverty line is not the way to get that society out. It's almost as if, I hesitate to say this, but it feels almost as if David Cameron and the Conservative cabinet wants to get rid of the poverty line by removing everyone under it, and that's a very serious issue. And I think that's something that we need to be dealt with.
Some sort of poverty communism, like everyone will be equally poor.
Well, yeah, well, no, as in they want to remove the people below the poverty line, not by putting them over it, but by removing them completely. It just seems as if they just want to kill off millions of people within the UK, and that's a serious issue.
Yeah, I don't know if they entirely want to do that, because obviously they need people to work for them. So, I'm not an expert on tax, but I think physically removing a lot of people will reduce the amount that gets paid in tax. Like, I honestly, if we went from a population of 60 million to 5, I think there'd be less money being paid in. But I'm not a tax expert, so what do I know?
Yeah, but I also don't think 55 million people in this country live below the poverty line.
No, it's true. Anyway, we should talk about celebrity gossip as we round up this show.
Yeah, sorry, that got really heavy at the end. Now
It did. Well, that's because occasionally we do stumble into quite important things. Equally important, I like to think, is that George Clooney and Amal Clooney have adopted a dog.
Now, I want to know something very serious about this. Do you know the name of the dog?
Let me read the article. Yes, Millie is a 4-year-old Basset Hound.
Actually, I like that because they
rescued from the San Gabriel Valley Humane Society shelter earlier today. So that's good. And now, I don't know why they're in San Gabriel Valley, because I thought they lived in Berkshire. And I live fairly near Berkshire. I don't remember a San Gabriel Valley as I've been driving around between like Slough and Egypt and Compton. But equally, I could be wrong.
I think you're driving the wrong places, mate.
True, I've been associating in the wrong ends.
Yes,
but,
that's it.
Yeah, I mean, adopting a dog is a very good thing, but like this is news because of who they are.
Well, I think it's lovely. I think it's great, and as I said, they've also named their dog something normal. Millie is a very normal name for a normal dog, as opposed to naming your kids Peaches or.
He's suggesting that if Chris Martin was still with Gwyneth Paltrow and they'd adopted a dog, they'd have called it like Planet Zog or something equally weird.
Yes, or Buzz Lightyear or something. Oh, I'm definitely getting a dog called Buzz Lightyear.
Actually, that'd be great for a dog, Buzz Lightyear.
Woody and Buzz Lightyear would be my two dogs.
Bluetooth and HDMI cable.
Bluetooth connectivity and HDMI cable, along with Wi-Fi router.
HTML, walkies. Yeah, no, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that.
4K plasma.
Well, it's nice to know that George and Amal are staying grounded.
Yes, but that was the thing. That was the thing about him marrying her, was that, he's a big Hollywood actor, and she's a human rights lawyer, and she's awesome, and he's awesome as well, and they're kind of a perfectly normal couple together, despite the fact that they are ridiculously good at everything they could ever put their minds to.
I think it's nice to know that even if you get loads and loads of money, you can stay really grounded. So, like, when this podcast blows up and we're commercialising the game, selling T-shirts and action figures, we'll still be pretty regular guys.
I'd like to think that people could approach us in the pub without being harassed.
Yeah, like, can you sign my action figure box? I'll be like, yeah.
Yeah. I love the Blakey action figure box. Will come with its own pair of headphones.
Yeah, and several removable hats.
Which, by the way, you have to try and remove below the headphones.
Maybe that's it. Maybe unlike Action Man, where you can change his hat, my hat is irremovable. Like that's its unique selling point.
And it's so annoying because it does come with spare hats, but the fact is that you can't remove the hat that's on him anyway.
That's quite a good gimmick, actually. But equally, that's not going to happen, so that's a shame. But yeah. Any closing remarks on the world's politics? Obviously, Russia still bombing Syria. Kind of died down a little bit in terms of what's in the news. People are like, oh yeah, that was happening last week.
I love it. It has died down.
Ukraine still ongoing. No one really talks about that anymore.
Yeah, that is true as well. So
the MH17. No, not MH17. The Ukrainian air disaster report got released, and the report said there were two separate reports by two different companies, or not companies, but like agencies, and the end of it was that the plane had been shot down with a Russian-made missile, which kind of, it confirms it was shot down, but it still doesn't really tell us anything.
Well, that was quite interesting because essentially it was made by they worked out from the wreckage that it was a Russian-made missile. It's a very specific type of Russian-made missile. The problem is this specific type of Russian-made missile has 3 versions, of which 2 are currently being used in the Ukraine, and 1 is being used by the rebels, and 1 is being used by the by the Ukrainian government. So it doesn't actually help us in knowing who shot down the plane, because effectively they said, right, this missile was used, but there are 3 different variants of which both sides used 1 variant each, and we can't tell which variant it was. So it's not a particularly helpful report. I mean, we all knew it had been shot down, but you know,
it is terrible, but it almost sounds so farcical. Like over 100 people died, I think. Was it 112?
it was a lot of people.
Yeah, but lots of people died, and the report is a farce. This is almost as inconclusive as saying that someone has been shot by an AK-47. We now have proof of what's happened, but we know nothing. And I honestly don't know if we ever will. I hope we do. I hope, because I hope for the family's sake that they can find out more. But you just get that sort of nagging doubt that it will just be one of those things that sort of slides away, because there will never be proof unless someone comes out and says it, or WikiLeaks, or something gets discovered. We're never going to know what happened, and that is terrible.
It is, and I think it's a damn shame, because both sides of the conflict are blaming each other. Russia's doing its own investigation, but I mean that will only prove that Putin is God, and nothing else really. That will be what will be at the end of the investigation. The Dutch did theirs and said, well, it was blown up, which everybody knew anyway. But I think the fact that no one's admitting culpability, no one is putting their hand up and saying, look, we shot it down, we thought it was a spy plane or whatever. That in itself is a really damning indictment upon the human cost within the Ukraine, really, because there's just a lot of people out there who don't care enough about over 100 people dying on a plane to admit when they were wrong, and that's horrible, really.
It is terrible. The final piece of political news we need to talk about, the Chilcot inquiry has been delayed again.
Yeah, until June or July next year. At which point, by the way, I can categorically tell you right now, John Chilcot, or Sir John Chilcot rather, will stand up at a podium, turn around to the world's media and say, yeah, it'll be another couple of months.
That's a good point. Maybe we should do, because this is meant to be the series about how long Corbyn lasts in leadership, which we assumed would be not very long, then we could go into season 4. So do we start season 4 or season 5 when the Chilcot inquiry finally comes out? Because what if Corbyn's still in power and then we have to go straight from season 3 to season 5?
Ooh, tricky. Well, because there was a writer's strike for series 4.
Maybe, but Chilcot inquiry. It's just when it eventually. I mean, I don't want to sound rude, but it's almost a joke. Like it's that long to come out.
Everyone knows it was illegal. We went into Iraq. Everyone knows that Tony Blair is probably culpable of a lot of crimes against humanity. But and we all know this already. So why has it taken an Iraq inquiry 4 years now to not publish what they found? I mean, what are they trying to do? I'll tell you what they're doing. I'll tell you exactly what they're doing. They've got for argument's sake, this is the Chilcot inquiry here, and what they're doing is they're going through it with a black pen and redacting about 2/3 of it.
Yeah, they might as well just print a load of black pages out, and they'll be like, yeah, so this is just all blank.
Actually, that used to be a prank you could do with fax machines, was to get a black page and fax it across to people, because all it would do was waste ink.
That is cool though, because printer ink is about the 5th most expensive liquid on Earth. So
so expensive.
So expensive. But anyway, yeah. So Chilcot's been delayed again. You don't think it's like a really old person who's really slow at typing, like uses one finger per letter, do you?
I like the idea. There's one person in a room listening to the tapes of the Chilcot inquiries, going, pause, rewind, and
just sliding the typewriter across.
Yeah, and
I've made a mistake. I've got to start page 400 again.
Start from the beginning of the tape.
Yeah, but it is a complete joke. So yeah. Anyway, see you again next week.
Next week, indeed.
Peace out.